In the heart of the land where the sun set ablaze every evening, painting the sky with hues of amber and violet, there lay the village of Yukumo. Nestled between rolling savannas and the towering majesty of the baobab trees, this village was renowned for its music, laughter, and stories that wrapped around the air like an old, comforting blanket. But there was one story that no one dared to speak of in broad daylight, one whispered only when the shadows grew long and the fires crackled, sending embers dancing into the night sky. It was the story of Micah, the girl whose beauty made rivers pause and winds change their course, yet whose secret was embedded in every pigment that touched her skin. Micah was unlike any other. From the day she was born, the midwives exchanged furtive glances as the glow in her skin pulsed beneath the lantern light. It was as if the earth itself had infused her with the rich, deep tones of its soil, blending seamlessly with the golds of ancient sands. As she grew, her mother, Temb, would murmur soft prayers while preparing the pastes and powders Micah would use, eyes flitting nervously to the windows as if expecting the forest spirits to listen in. At first, these potions and pigments were merely seen as Temb's way of nurturing her daughter's unmatched beauty. Micah's face, adorned with ochres and charcoal lined to perfection, told stories of the sun's journey and the ancient wars between the sky gods and the sea demons. But with each year, the village elders became more watchful, their brows furrowed with questions left unasked. "Micah, why must you always carry those pots?" teased Ikeen, a boy who could trace back his lineage to the warrior chief that once defended Yukumo. He had eyes the color of storm clouds and a voice that carried on the wind like a call to adventure. He was as bold as he was curious. "They are not just pots," Micah replied, a smile brushing the corner of her lips, masking the truth that flickered behind her eyes. "They are stories in waiting, songs that are not yet sung." The secret Temb kept was older than the village itself, a blend of the whispers of the ancient baobab and the songs of the river spirits. Each morning, Temb would wake before the first crow of the rooster, her hands trembling as she mixed fine powders from dried roots and leaves brought to her by travelers from distant lands. These powders were not for mere adornment, they were the essence of a forgotten pact. Long ago, before the first drums echoed across the plains and the first crops of millet were sown, there was a powerful river spirit named Quasira. She was a guardian of dreams and the silent witness to many secrets. When humans first came to Yukumo, they disturbed her slumber with their fires and songs. Quasira, in her wrath, cursed the soil beneath their feet, making it barren. No tree bore fruit, and no crop dared sprout. It was an ancestor of Micah's, the wise Temelwa, who dared to face the raging spirit, her voice steady as she offered a bargain. "Grant us the life of the earth, and we shall keep your spirit alive in the song of our daughters." Quasira agreed, binding the village with a promise. The firstborn daughter of every generation would carry the mark of the river's soul, her beauty not only of this earth but also of dreams. And so it was that the pigments mixed by Temb were not just colors, they were imbued with whispers of Quasira herself. But such power came with its price. Micah's makeup held her true nature bound, hiding the deep, unearthly glow that could command the attention of spirits, both benevolent and malicious. Only Temb knew the full cost of each line drawn on Micah's face, each pattern that guarded her daughter's existence from prying eyes and powerful forces. One day, when the heat of midday had stilled even the buzz of insects, a stranger appeared at the village gate. His clothes were woven with threads of silver, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. He walked with an air that made the village dogs shrink back and the children pause their play. He called himself Ndugu, and he brought with him the scent of salt and stories of lands beyond the horizon. Ndugu's presence was unsettling. He watched Micah with a gaze that felt like it could peel back her layers, like he knew the truth hidden beneath the chalks and oils. When he finally approached her, the air felt heavy, charged as if before a storm. "Child of Temelwa," he said, his voice low and echoing. "Do you know the price of the beauty you wear?" The village square fell silent as Micah stood, the sun casting a halo around her as she met Ndugu's eyes. "What do you seek, traveler?" she asked, her voice strong, yet a tremor betrayed the weight of centuries pressing against her. "I seek the truth in your makeup," he said, stepping closer, each word a pulse that resonated deep within her chest. If only they knew. Night fell swiftly over Yukumo, a velvet blanket studded with stars that whispered tales older than time itself. The village, usually alive with the crackle of firelight and the rhythm of gems, stood in an unnatural stillness. Ndugu's arrival had sent ripples through the heart of every villager, as if the air itself held its breath. Micah sat alone in the dim glow of her family's hut. The intricate patterns on her face shimmered under the flickering light of the oil lamp, alive with the memories of generations. Tem sat across from her, fingers shaking as she twisted and untwisted the edges of her faded cloth. "Mother," Micah said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of the question that lay between them. "Who is Ndugu, and why does he know my name?" Tem's eyes, dark as the earth and lined with years of worry, met her daughter's. "He is a seeker, my child. One who walks the path between the worlds. There are few left like him, and none with good intentions." A shiver ran down Micah's spine. She had heard whispers of seekers, people who traveled from village to village in search of the remnants of lost spirits and forgotten gods. They were said to carry the power to unearth what should remain hidden, and in their wake, turmoil followed. As the night deepened, the distant beat of drums echoed faintly, like a heartbeat shared by the earth itself. It was the drum of the elders, an invitation and a warning. Micah knew what it meant. A council had been called, one that only the most serious matters could summon. "Micah, you must not go," Tem whispered urgently, her voice barely above the crackling of the dying fire. But Micah's gaze was fixed outside, where shadows moved like whispers among the tall grasses. She felt the pull, an ache in her bones that matched the rhythm of the drums. It was as if something long dormant within her stirred to life. "I have to, Mother," Micah said, more to herself than to the woman who had spent every day weaving a fragile protection around her. Before Tem could protest further, Micah stepped out into the night, the cool air biting at her skin, the weight of her secret pressing heavy on her chest. The village square was lit by the glow of torches. Faces lined with age and wisdom sat in a circle, their eyes focused on the center where Ndugu stood, his cloak shifting like liquid shadow. He turned his hawk-like eyes to Micah as she approached, a smile that did not touch his eyes spreading across his lips. "You came," he said, as if he had no doubt she would. Micah stood tall, the subtle shimmer of her makeup catching the firelight, making her look otherworldly. "You speak of truths unknown. What do you want with me, stranger?" The elders exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Chief Adissa, whose voice had commanded respect for decades, stepped forward. His hair was as white as the peak of Mount Kilima, and his gaze held the steadiness of a river stone. "Ndugu has made claims that stir the dust of our ancestors," he said, his voice deep and steady. "Claims that you, Micah, hold more than beauty upon your skin." A murmur rose from the crowd, but Ndugu lifted a hand, silencing them. "This is no mere tale," he said. "The girl's makeup is not just a testament to her lineage but a key to waking the spirit that once slumbered beneath these lands." Temb, who had crept silently to the edge of the gathering, gasped, clutching the necklace at her throat. Micah's heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and defiance. She could feel the earth beneath her feet, its pulse aligning with her own, as if listening. "What spirit?" Micah demanded, anger slicing through her fear. "What do you mean to awaken?" Nduga's eyes met hers, and for a moment, they softened, revealing a glimmer of something that could have been pity. Quazira's vengeance was never fully put to rest. It slumbers in the veins of those who bear her mark. And now, the world shifts. The balance demands it be confronted, whether we wish it or not. A hush fell over the square, broken only by the crackle of torches and the whisper of leaves in the night wind. Chief Adissa nodded solemnly. "We have avoided this truth for too long. If it is true that Quazira stirs, then Micah's destiny will decide the fate of Yukumo." The elders chanted an old song, one rarely sung, a melody that spoke of battles fought not with spears but with the courage of heart and spirit. Micah stood in the center of it all, the ancient rhythm vibrating in her very marrow. The realization settled over her like a heavy cloak. She was more than a keeper of stories, more than a girl marked by beauty. She was the living seal between a restless spirit and the world that had long forgotten its power. Nduga's voice rose above the song, deep and haunting. "The question is, Micah, will you wield the power in your veins, or will it consume you as it once did those who came before?" The night held its breath as Micah's answer hung in the balance, the weight of generations pressing down on her fragile human form. The air was thick with tension as dawn approached, casting a silvery glow over the village of Yukumo. The elders, wrapped in cloaks that bore symbols of the sun and moon, lingered near the fire pit, their chants fading into the gentle rustle of waking leaves. The village itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first golden rays to pierce the horizon. Micah stood apart, her heart thundering in her chest as if it were a drum calling warriors to battle. The cryptic warning from Dugu lingered in her mind, like the echo of a storm yet to come. The quiet murmur of her mother's voice beside her brought her back to the present. "Listen to me, Micah," Tem said, her hands rough but gentle on her daughter's face. The early light revealed the deep lines around Tem's eyes, etched by years of silent worry. "You must go to the spirit caverns. The answers you seek, and the strength you need, lie there. The spirit caverns." The very mention of them made the gathered villagers stiffen. Legends told of spirits that dwelled in the darkness, guardians of ancient knowledge and lost souls. Few dared to approach, and those who did often returned changed or never at all. Micah's voice was steady despite the tightness in her throat. "I will go. If my destiny holds the fate of Yukumo, then I cannot turn away." Tem's eyes glistened, a mixture of pride and deep, unspoken fear. She pressed a small pouch into Micah's hand. It was tied with a thin string made of braided reeds, and the scent of dried herbs drifted from it. "This is for protection. Use it only if you must." Before the first rays of sunlight touched the tops of the baobab trees, Micah set out, the earth cool beneath her feet and the morning air thick with the hum of cicadas. The path to the spirit caverns was shrouded in undergrowth, winding like the trail of an old, forgotten river. The only sound was the crunch of her steps and the faint rustle of leaves as the forest watched her pass. Hours passed before Micah reached the mouth of the cavern, a jagged maw carved into the earth by time and rain. She paused, feeling a presence in the stillness that hung around her like a shroud. The whispers of the ancestors seemed to seep from the stones themselves, their voices a chorus of warnings and encouragement. As she stepped into the darkness, the cool air wrapped around her, and the scent of damp earth filled her senses. Shadows danced on the walls, shapes of old spirits that once roamed these lands. The deeper she went, the louder a rhythmic pounding grew, echoing in her chest. It was the sound of drums, drums that no human hands had touched for generations. Suddenly, a voice broke through the drumming, deep and resonant, like the earth speaking. "Who dares to enter this sacred place with the mark of Quazira upon them?" Micah halted, her pulse quickening. "It is I, Micah of Yukumo. I come seeking the truth of what lies within me." A shape emerged from the shadows, a tall figure draped in woven fabric that shimmered with the colors of dawn and dusk. His eyes, as bright and endless as the sky, held the weight of centuries. It was Omoda, the guardian spirit who had once walked among mortals before taking his place as the keeper of the caverns. "Do you know what you carry, child?" Omoda's voice softened as he stepped closer, each word resonating through the cavern. "You are both a shield and a key. You hold the essence of Quazira's power, but power untamed is a storm that will break even the strongest vessel." Micah clenched the pouch in her hand. "I don't wish for power, I wish to protect my village. I wish to understand what I am meant to do." Omoda's gaze grew distant, as if he could see beyond the stone walls, to a time when spirits and mortals spoke freely under the same sky. "To wield what is within you, you must first face the trials of the ancestors. They will show you what was, what is, and what could be." Before she could respond, the walls around her shifted, and the drumming intensified. Figures emerged from the dark, translucent but filled with a light that pulsed like fire. They were the ancestors, their faces stern and eyes filled with a knowledge that surpassed lifetimes. One stepped forward, an old woman wrapped in a cloak of woven reeds and shells that clattered softly as she moved. "To carry Quazira's essence is to know sacrifice, child. Will you walk the path laid before you, no matter the cost?" Micah swallowed, her mouth dry. The shadows around her seemed to breathe, waiting for her response. "I will. For Yukumo, I will." The ancestors' eyes glowed brighter, and the cavern rumbled. Omoda's voice echoed one last time before the trial began. "Then let the spirit of the river test your heart, for only in facing your deepest fears will you know the true strength within you." Suddenly, the ground beneath Micah cracked, and she fell into darkness, surrounded by the voices of the past. Each one spoke a truth, a fear, a choice that would shape not only her fate but the fate of the world that depended on her. Micah's descent felt endless, as if she had fallen into the very heart of the world. The darkness swallowed her whole, leaving only the echo of her breath and the whispers of ancient voices. When she landed, it was not with a thud but with the weightless sensation of stepping into a dream. She opened her eyes to find herself standing on a vast, silvery plain, its surface shimmering like a moonlit lake. Before her, a fire blazed without wood or fuel, a living flame that pulsed with life. Around it, shadowy figures danced, their movements fluid and rhythmic, weaving between the realms of the living and the spirit. The figures' faces were obscured, but their essence was familiar, echoes of those who had carried Quasira's mark before her. A voice rang out, clear and sharp, slicing through the murmur of shadows. Micah of Yukumo, you have entered the realm of trials. Here, your heart will be weighed, and your spirit tested. The speaker emerged from the crowd, a tall, regal woman draped in robes of deep indigo adorned with patterns of stars. Her eyes gleamed like polished obsidian, and her hair, braided with threads of gold, spoke of power and ancestry. She was Nyoka, the seer of the plains, a spirit who guided those who dared to challenge fate. Do you understand why you are here, child? Nyoka's voice held neither malice nor kindness, only the weight of truth. Micah's fingers tightened around the pouch Temb had given her. I am here to protect my village, to understand the power that sleeps within me. Nyoka's expression did not change, but the shadows around her rippled, a silent reaction to Micah's words. Then you shall face 3 trials, the trial of the heart, the trial of memory, and the trial of choice. Each will reveal a part of you and what it means to bear Quasira's legacy. The fire flared, sending sparks dancing into the dark expanse. The first trial began without warning. The silvery plain shifted, morphing into the familiar outline of Yukumo, but it was not as Micah had left it. The village was shrouded in a thick fog, and a sorrowful wail echoed through the empty huts. A child's cry pierced the silence, sharp and desperate. Micah's heart twisted as she recognized the voice. It was her own, echoing from years past. She ran towards the sound, past ghostly images of villagers who stared with hollow eyes. They whispered accusations that followed her like shadows. She carries the curse. She will bring the spirit's wrath upon us all. The cries grew louder until Micah found herself at the old riverbank, where the memory of her younger self stood, her small frame shaking as tears streaked her face. In the water, the reflection was not that of a child but of Quasira's spirit, eyes blazing with an unnatural light. Micah approached cautiously, her heart thundering with recognition. This was the moment she first understood that she was different, that the whispers of the villagers were more than just tales. The trial forced her to confront the pain of being seen as both savior and harbinger. Do you accept who you are? Nyoka's voice echoed through the scene. Do you embrace the fear and power that lies within? The child in the memory looked up, eyes wide and full of tears, searching Micah's face for answers. Micah knelt, touching the small girl's shoulder as if to comfort herself. Yes, she whispered, the word vibrating with the strength of a drumbeat. I accept it all. The fog lifted, and with it, the echoes of the past dissolved. Micah stood again in the silvery expanse, Nyoka's eyes now softened by a glint of approval. You have faced the trial of the heart, Nyoka said. Now, you must remember. The ground shifted once more, turning to a forest shrouded in twilight. The trees whispered in voices that spoke not to Micah's ears but to her very bones. This was the trial of memory. It led her through the stories that had been told by the elders around the fires, stories of Temelwa and the pact with Quasira. She saw the spirit of the river in her full magnificent form, scales glistening with the colors of dawn, eyes that held the ocean's fury and a mother's longing. A vision of Temelwa appeared, her face fierce yet kind. We made a choice, she said, her voice blending with the wind. A choice that bound our bloodline to the spirit's will, for good or ill. You carry more than power, Micah. You carry hope, and with it, the burden of choice. The vision blurred, pulling Micah into the final trial. She stood now before a river that roared with such force it seemed it could swallow the world whole. Across its bank stood Ndugu, his cloak billowing, eyes intent. This is the trial of choice, Nyoka's voice called. Will you wield what you are given for your own sake, or for the sake of all? Nduga's expression was unreadable, but his voice reached her over the roar of the river. Step forward, Micah, and claim what is yours. Micah looked at the river, its currents fierce and unyielding. The choice was clear, the choice that Temelwa had faced, that every ancestor marked by Quasira had faced. She could wield her power for herself, to protect her own life, or she could embrace the weight of her lineage and stand as a guardian for her people. With a deep breath, Micah stepped into the river, feeling its icy pull, its power testing every fiber of her being. She spoke with a voice that trembled but did not falter. For Yukumo, I will carry this burden. The river roared in approval, lifting her and carrying her to the opposite shore, where the sun broke through the sky, painting the world in gold. Nyoka's voice whispered in her mind, proud and serene. You have passed, Maika. You are the bridge between light and shadow, between spirit and earth. May your choices shape the future. The vision faded, and Maika found herself back at the mouth of the cavern, the first light of dawn touching her face. She knew now what she had to do and who she had become. As the sun's golden fingers reached across the horizon, Maika felt the warmth on her skin, a welcome contrast to the cold of the spirit caverns. The trials had left her not only exhausted but deeply aware of the burden and power she now carried. The voices of the ancestors, the pulse of the river, and the weight of choice lingered in her mind like an old melody. The village of Yukumo woke with the sun, its thatched roofs glistening with dew, and the soft clatter of morning routines echoing through the air. Women carried clay pots of water on their heads, and children darted between huts, their laughter sharp and bright. Yet, an air of unease still lingered, a tension left by the arrival of Ndugu and the truth he bore. Tem was waiting for Maika at the edge of the village, her eyes searching and filled with hope. When she saw her daughter, whole and unharmed, a sob of relief escaped her. She rushed forward, gathering Maika into her arms. You have returned, my child, Tem said, her voice muffled against Maika's hair. The scent of herbs and smoke clung to her mother's clothes, familiar and grounding. Maika stepped back, holding her mother's gaze. I have passed the trials, mother. I know what I am, and I know what must be done. Before Tem could respond, the sharp cry of a conch shell split the air, calling the villagers to the square. The elders stood in a solemn line, their faces carved with concern and anticipation. Ndugu, the mysterious seeker, stood in the center, his presence as unsettling as the storm clouds that gathered on the horizon. People of Yukumo, Chief Adissa began, raising a staff adorned with feathers and beads. Today, we face a choice that will shape the future of our land. The spirit of Kwazira stirs, and only through the strength of our guardian can we find peace. Nduga's eyes met Maika's as she stepped forward, the crowd parting like the sea before her. Whispers rippled through the villagers, some of awe, others of doubt. But Maika's stride was steady, and the light of dawn framed her like a halo. Ndugu inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect she did not expect. You have walked the path of the ancestors, he said. Now, the spirit demands its due. Are you prepared to awaken it and bind its power, for better or worse? Maika nodded, the resolve in her heart unyielding. I am ready. The elders exchanged glances, their faces a mix of fear and hope. Chief Adissa stepped forward, his voice deep and resonant. Then let the ritual begin. At the center of the square, a circle of stones had been laid, each carved with symbols representing the elements: fire, water, earth, and air. The villagers formed a wide ring around it, their eyes wide and silent as the wind picked up, swirling dust and leaves in a dance of anticipation. Tem came forward with a small bowl filled with a paste she had mixed countless times, its color deep and rich, infused with the essence of roots and herbs that carried stories older than memory. She met her daughter's eyes, her hands steady despite the tremor of her voice. This is your shield, Maika. Let it guide you. Maika took the paste and began to apply it to her skin, tracing the patterns that told the story of her lineage and the pact with Kwazira. As she did, a murmur rose among the villagers, some drawing back as the lines glowed faintly, pulsing with the beat of a hidden drum. The ground beneath them began to rumble, a deep vibration that resonated in their bones. The river that bordered Yukumo churned, its waters rising as if reaching for the village. Gasps echoed through the crowd as a figure formed from the water, towering and fierce, eyes as deep and restless as the ocean. Kwazira had awakened. The spirit's voice was a chorus, a harmony of rushing water and rustling leaves. Who dares call upon me? Who bears the mark of my will? Maika stepped into the circle of stones, her heart a steady drum. I do, great Kwazira. I bear your mark, and I call upon you not for power, but for balance. The time of chaos must end. Kwazira's eyes narrowed, the air around her thick with energy. The water that formed her body shimmered, shifting between the shape of a fierce warrior and a gentle river maiden. You speak of balance, yet you know the price. Will you pay it, guardian? Maika nodded, her voice unwavering. I will. With a wave of her hand, Kwazira sent a wave crashing towards Maika. The villagers screamed, but Maika stood firm, the patterns on her skin blazing as the water halted inches from her, suspended as if frozen in time. The light in the paste Temb had prepared flared, drawing a gasp from the crowd as Micah began to chant the words that had come to her during the trials. By the breath of the ancestors, by the bond of earth and water, let the pact be renewed. Let power serve peace. The air shimmered with heat and light as Quasira's form dissolved into a mist that wrapped around Micah, binding itself to the glowing lines on her skin. The river receded, its surface calming until it was once more a gentle, flowing current. The storm clouds above dispersed, leaving a clear, open sky. The silence that followed was deep, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. The villagers stared, awe and wonder etched on their faces. Chief Adissa stepped forward, his eyes wide with reverence. Micah of Yukumo, you have restored the balance. You are not just a guardian, you are a bridge between our world and the spirit realm. Nduga's gaze softened, a rare smile breaking the seriousness of his face. He nodded, as if in approval, before turning and walking away, disappearing into the forest without another word. Temb rushed to Micah's side, tears streaming down her face. You did it, my child. You did it. Micah looked out over her village, a place that was now more than just home. It was a testament to the power of choice, sacrifice, and the unyielding spirit of those who dared to hold the balance between worlds. Yukumo awoke to a new dawn, one where the shadows of the past no longer clung to the village like a shroud. The air was charged with a sense of possibility, a lightness that had not been felt for generations. Micah stood at the riverbank, the morning sun casting a warm glow on the water as it whispered and sang around her feet. The patterns on her skin, once a secret, now pulsed with a gentle, harmonious light, binding her not just to the spirit world but to the heart of Yukumo itself. Villagers began to gather, their eyes filled with wonder and newfound respect. The elders stood at the forefront, their silence speaking of the awe they felt. Chief Adissa raised his staff, the beads and feathers catching the light. His voice, deep and steady, called to the people. Today, we celebrate not just the return of peace, but the renewal of our bond with the spirits who share this land. We are reminded that the stories of our ancestors are not just tales, but truths that shape us. A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. Some of the younger children, who had watched the events with wide eyes, whispered excitedly among themselves. To them, Micah was no longer just the girl who walked among them, but a symbol of courage and strength. Temb, standing beside Micah, reached for her daughter's hand. The lines of worry that had once marked her face were replaced by a look of pride. You have done what many before you could not, Micah, she said, her voice soft and filled with emotion. The spirit of Quasira is at peace, and so are we. Before Micah could respond, the clear, melodic sound of a flute rose from the crowd. It was Bayo, the village's youngest musician, his fingers dancing over the carved wood as if the song was drawn from his very soul. The tune was one of hope, a song passed down through generations, said to awaken joy even in the darkest times. One by one, the villagers joined in, clapping and stomping in rhythm. The square erupted in celebration, bodies moving in a dance that echoed the heartbeat of the earth. The old and the young, the timid and the bold, all were part of this joyous wave that swept through Yukumo. Micah felt a smile spread across her face, a rare moment of pure peace settling in her heart. The trials had tested her, stripped her bare, and shown her the depth of what she carried. But in this moment, surrounded by her people and the pulse of life, she understood that her journey was not just about duty but about love, for her mother, her village, and the stories that would now carry on beyond her. As the dance continued, a sudden breeze stirred the leaves of the baobab trees, carrying with it a whisper that only Micah could hear. It was the voice of Quasira, softer now, without the fury that had once marked it. Guardian, your choice has awakened more than balance. It has brought life back to the stories untold. Watch and listen, for this is just the beginning. Micah's eyes swept the village, taking in every detail, the laughter, the music, the warmth that connected them all. The trials had taught her that power was not just in might or fear but in connection, in understanding the harmony that wove through all things. Nduga's absence lingered at the edge of her mind. The seeker had come with warnings, challenged her with truths, and left without a word once balance had been restored. Yet, she knew deep down that his journey and hers were not so different. Both had been guided by the unseen paths of the spirit world, pushed by the currents of fate. As the sun climbed higher, Micah stepped forward, her voice clear and strong as she called out, "Today, we celebrate not only our ancestors but the spirit of who we are. Let this be a reminder that even in silence, there is strength. In each story, there is a lesson, and in each of us, a guardian waits to be awakened. The villagers cheered, their voices rising in a chorus that echoed off the surrounding hills. The music swelled, and Micah joined the dance, her movements blending with the rhythm as if guided by an unseen force. The past, present, and future felt intertwined, no longer separate threads but one vibrant tapestry. That night, as the fires burned low and the stars blanketed the sky, Yukumo sat together, sharing food, stories, and laughter. The old tales were told with new vigor, and Micah's story was added to the repertoire, recited by the elders who had once doubted but now believed. Thames sat beside her daughter, their hands clasped, the quiet understanding between them deeper than words. Micah looked up at the sky, where the stars twinkled like the eyes of spirits watching over them. For the first time in what felt like forever, peace did not feel fragile. It felt earned, solid, and alive. As the night deepened, the wind whispered through the village, carrying with it a promise that even the smallest flame could illuminate the darkest path, and the strongest bonds were woven not just by blood, but by the choices made when the world held its breath. The weeks following the renewal of Yukumo were unlike any the village had seen. The river, once a silent witness to generations of toil and song, now hummed with a subtle vibrance. Children played at its banks, their laughter carried downstream as if blessed by the spirit that once slumbered there. The baobab trees, ancient sentinels of time, stood prouder, their thick branches embracing the sky with newfound energy. Micah found herself in the heart of this awakening, no longer just a girl marked by whispers but a guardian whose name was spoken with reverence. The village's stories wove her trials into songs that traveled beyond Yukumo, reaching the ears of neighboring tribes who came with gifts and questions, seeking to know the one who had called peace from the depths of an angry spirit. One such morning, as Micah sat by the river tracing patterns in the sand, she was approached by Mosi, a traveler with skin as dark as night and eyes that glistened like polished onyx. His arrival had stirred curiosity, for he came bearing tales of lands where the sun kissed the deserts and the mountains whispered secrets to the wind. "You are Micah, the one who speaks with spirits?" Mosi asked, his voice deep and rich like the beat of a drum. Micah looked up, surprised by the certainty in his tone. "I am," she replied, her voice steady yet questioning. "What brings you so far from home, traveler?" Mosi sat beside her, the fabric of his robe shifting like the sands of the distant dunes. "Word of your deeds has reached the edges of the Red Plains. The spirits there have grown restless, their murmurs louder with each moon's turn. I have come to seek your wisdom, to learn how we might bring balance to our own lands." The river's song seemed to quiet, as if listening. Micah's heart swelled with both pride and a flicker of unease. The trials she had faced were not unique to Yukumo. They were the echoes of a world bound by the whims and tempers of spirits. She glanced at the water, where her reflection, adorned with a faint glow of Quasira's mark, stared back with eyes that carried both the weight and the fire of knowing. "Balance is not a gift, but a choice," she said finally, repeating the lesson she had learned deep within the spirit caverns. To find peace, one must walk between the worlds and listen, not just with ears, but with the heart. Mosi nodded thoughtfully, his gaze drifting to the river. "There are those who fear the silence, who cannot bear to listen. What would you say to them?" Micah's thoughts turned to the villagers who had once watched her with wary eyes, their voices sharp with suspicion. She recalled the fear that had gripped her mother and the quiet defiance of Temelwa's spirit. "I would tell them that silence is not emptiness. It is where the stories live before they are told, where the earth holds its breath before the rain falls." The day passed with Mosi sharing tales of his homeland, of desert spirits that danced in the heat haze and mountains that rumbled with voices deep and ancient. His stories painted images of a world just as vibrant and fierce as Yukumo, bound by the same delicate thread of harmony and discord. As night fell, the elders gathered around the great fire in the village square, eager to hear the stories Mosi brought and to offer their own in return. The flames leapt high, casting shadows that moved like dancers on the walls of nearby huts. Chief Adissa, his staff gleaming in the firelight, welcomed the traveler with a nod. "Tell us, Mosi, what troubles your land, and what hope do you seek here?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority of age and wisdom. Mosi stood, the fire painting his face with flickering light. "Our lands speak with the voice of the wind, fierce and untamed. The spirits of the desert grow restless, thirsty for recognition and respect that has been lost. They reach out through storms and the shifting sands, and we fear their patience wears thin. A murmur of understanding passed through the gathered villagers. The people of Yukumo knew too well what it meant for a spirit to demand its due. Micah stood, feeling the weight of expectations settle on her shoulders. The spirits do not stir without reason, she said, addressing both Mosi and her people. To seek balance, you must offer them what they seek: honor, remembrance, and the song of stories untold. Tem's voice, soft but resolute, rose from where she sat. We must teach them to listen, Micah. Just as you learned, they too must face their trials. Micah nodded. The journey was clear. She would guide Mosi back to his land, where they would find the silence that held the answers, the silence that hummed with the truth of all that had been forgotten. The night stretched long as plans were made and stories shared. The villagers spoke of the guardian who had not only faced Quazira but had brought new life to their village, a testament to the power of listening and the courage to act. Micah knew that the path ahead was one of uncertainty, but she felt the pulse of the earth beneath her, steady and strong, echoing the truth she now carried within. As the fire burned low and the first light of dawn touched the sky, Micah sat with Mosi by the river, their gazes lost in the horizon where the sun promised a new journey. The world was vast, and the spirits were many, but so too were the stories, each waiting for a guardian to bring them to life. With the promise of morning came the knowledge that Yukumo's tale was but one chapter in the great story of the land. And Micah, the bridge between the realms, would walk where the spirits led, her heart open to the whispers that only she could hear. The morning sun rose slowly over Yukumo, gilding the village in hues of gold and amber. The village square, once the center of fear and uncertainty, now thrived with life and purpose. Micah stood at the edge of the river, the breeze lifting strands of her hair as it carried the scent of dew and wildflowers. Today was the day she would leave Yukumo to guide Mosi back to his desert homeland, where new trials awaited. The villagers gathered, their faces a tapestry of pride, gratitude, and sadness. Chief Adissa stepped forward, his staff marking the ground with a thud. Micah, you have been more than our guardian. You have become our voice, our bridge. Today, you leave as a beacon of hope, carrying with you the stories of Yukumo and the strength of our ancestors. Tem approached her daughter, eyes bright with unshed tears. In her hands, she held a cloth, woven with the patterns of their lineage, spirals that represented the river's flow, and diamonds that spoke of resilience. Wear this, Micah, she said, draping it over her daughter's shoulders. It is a reminder that no matter where you go, you carry us with you. Micah felt the weight of her mother's love, the warmth of her people's trust, and the pulse of Quazira's spirit within her. She turned to the villagers, her voice strong and steady. Yukumo's story is not just mine, it is all of ours. Today, I go to bring balance to another place, to share what we have learned. Know that our bond will guide me, and the song of Yukumo will echo wherever I walk. Mosi, standing nearby, watched with a respectful silence. His journey had brought him here seeking answers, and now, he would return with the guardian herself. He nodded, acknowledging the strength he saw in Micah. The path from Yukumo to the desert was long and unforgiving, marked by savannas that sang with the chirps of unseen birds and plains that rolled like a sea of green. As they journeyed, Mosi shared tales of the red plains, of spirits that slumbered beneath the sands, whose voices were carried on the hot winds. Micah listened, feeling the steady thrum of connection between her own experiences and those she would soon face. Days turned into weeks, and as the land changed beneath their feet, so too did the air. The cool embrace of the river was replaced by dry winds that whispered and roared, carrying grains of sand that stung like needles. They arrived at Mosi's village at the edge of the desert, where the earth met sky in a dance of red and gold. The people there were weary, eyes shadowed with worry and lips cracked from the heat. But when they saw Micah, hope flared in their eyes, small but fierce. Mosi's elders stood waiting, their robes dyed in deep ochres and embroidered with symbols of the wind and sun. The oldest among them, a man whose voice rasped like shifting sand, spoke first. You are the guardian we have heard of, the one who carries the spirit of the river within. Micah nodded, meeting their gaze with confidence born of trials faced and overcome. I come not just with answers, but with the knowledge that peace comes from balance, from listening to what is unseen and unsaid. The elders exchanged glances, their expressions softening with understanding. That night, as the stars spread across the dark canvas of the sky, Micah began the ritual of listening. She sat at the center of the village, eyes closed, ears open to the whispers of the desert spirits. The wind shifted, carrying the voices of the past, the stories of anger and longing, of forgotten songs buried beneath the sands. The spirit of the desert revealed itself as a great serpent of sand and light, its scales shimmering with the heat of the day and the cool of the night. Its eyes, bright and ancient, met Micah's, searching her for weakness, for purpose. "Why have you come, bearer of the river's mark?" the spirit's voice rumbled, echoing through the dunes. Micah stood tall, her hands outstretched. "I have come not to command, but to listen, to remind you that the songs of the desert are as vital as the river's flow. The people here have forgotten how to listen. They speak without hearing, and they walk without seeing." The spirit coiled, its body shifting the sands in waves. "And what will you do to change this, guardian?" A hush fell over the village as Micah spoke. "I will teach them to honor the silence, to find strength in stillness and in song. I will remind them that balance is found not just in power, but in humility." The spirit's eyes glowed, and with a nod, it dissipated into the night, leaving the village quiet and filled with a new-found peace. The wind calmed, its song softer now, as if humming a lullaby. Mosi looked at Micah, awe and gratitude etched into his face. "You have brought hope, Micah. Our people will learn, just as yours did." As dawn touched the horizon, bathing the desert in light, Micah knew her journey was far from over. The spirits of the world were many, and their stories, like the people they touched, needed guardians who could walk between worlds, who could listen when others would not. Turning to face the rising sun, Micah felt the pulse of the earth, the river, and now the desert within her. She was not just of Yukumo anymore, she was of the land, a guardian who would carry the stories and strength of her people wherever she went. And as the wind whispered through the village, it carried a promise, that Micah's journey, though marked by trials and shadows, would always lead her to places where stories needed to be told, and spirits long forgotten would find their voice once more.